Welcome, everybody. My name is Alex. I'm a TD for Electronic Arts Romania, and we're here to talk about what should be a very exciting topic, or at least that's the point of the presentation, make it exciting for everybody, which is security. And not only security, but large-scale security. What large-scale means is pretty much nothing. It's just a fluffy title. What this presentation is just a cry out around awareness and the importance of just being all around secure, what the possible threats are, what the exploits are, how people are attacking, not only games, but software products or even other types of products in general, and how the mindset should be when dealing with this kind of thing. So this was supposed to be the actual title that didn't pass the board meeting. It's supposed to be a story around how easy it is to just look between somebody who's baking cakes and trying to be, good at baking cakes versus somebody who's building software. So it's an easy, close gap to bridge. So first we got to define the problem, right? So everybody talks about security. Is your app secure? Is your software secure? Have you done this patch? Are you using this protocol? So, what I don't want this to be is an advanced cryptography presentation because it's going to bore the hell out of everybody. So let's just look at a problem. So let's say, you're a developer and your friends call you Dev for short, and you're a cake baker, and you had this, bakery shop, and you sell cakes, and everything is going amazing. It's a local business, not too many people have caught on, so you're sort of small scale for now. And you're baking cakes. You're super popular, like long line in the neighborhood. Everybody wants your cake. Everybody's interested in buying your cake, and you make a whole lot of money out of it. But there's this one person called Hack ER Mike. We're just going to call him Hacker Mike from now on, which is the political correct version was Hack ER, who doesn't really like you and loves cookies but doesn't want to pay for them. So this is just a picture of him. So the problem is that at some point you discover, you do the math, you do your own accounting, and you add up the month income, and you realize you've sold, say, 200 cookies that month, and which is great. But you then realize that you've spent ingredients that could have made 300 cookies. That's like a first sign that something's just a bit broken. Something doesn't add up. You spent flour and chocolate chip and candy to make 300 cookies, but you actually sold and you see the money for 200. So you obviously got a problem somehow. So you thought, sure, it's a problem. I can, easy fix it. Profits going down. I can definitely do it myself. And, you do. You don't think about, getting professional help. You think it's just a small problem. You probably know, and you suspect Hacker Mike is behind it, so you think, sure, I'll fix it. So you start looking like any normal cake baker at technology, like one does. So the first line of defense against, I guess, anything is just getting a front door into your house. Like that front door is HTTPS. If everything's going out of your product on just unsecured, classical 80-port communications, you're in a pretty bad shape. So you get a front door. And while I was building this presentation, I don't know why, what possessed me to just Google front door and window sales in the US in 2009. This is a very eloquent example of how people think about security and how much they care, which they don't. And that's really bad. So I Googled data, and I couldn't find anything other than 2009 that had both doors and windows. So front doors, that's only front doors, so it's not interior doors. Front doors and windows sales in millions in the US in 2009. So you would say, that's about right. The only problem is that if you think about it, windows, you usually replace those windows when they're broken, household accidents, whatever. Doors, nobody just, breaks down a door accidentally. You usually do it to secure your, home. So you get about like 1 to 3 door-to-window ratio, which sounds legit, but if you, and I actually Googled this next bit of information, the average door-to-window ratio in a house is 1 to 21. So what does that actually tell you? And it's really very key to just human nature and behavior. It's basically people who would want to secure something are really going down the path of securing the way that they're using that product. So if you want to secure your house, how do you get in your house? Through the door, obviously. So if you build this big door with steel bars and a cipher, you're perfectly safe, which is completely wrong, obviously. Because you install huge-ass door, and it's got fingerprint scanner, and it's bolted onto the walls, but then you forget the window open. And the most common question when you leave the house is, oh my God, did we lock the door? Nobody thinks, oh my God, did we lock the windows, or did we lock the back door, or if there's a chimney entrance available. So yeah, this is how people usually think. Unfortunately, it's just around security. If I get, the way I interface with my app, game, whatever product is exactly the same way anybody who's going to want to steal it or do something to it is going to do it, which is false, because there's obviously a whole bunch of other ways that you haven't thought about. So Devon, which we talked about earlier, goes on and upgrades her door, because she sees the problem isn't going away, to a more sophisticated door, so to speak. So that's TLS. For looking back in history, there's the SSL standard came out like years ago. It was SSL 1 and SSL 2 and SSL 3, and then they moved to TLS. And every time they moved, it was because somebody proved that it can break it. They can somehow do something to it that it gets broken. So that's, again, like a pillar of security in general. Whatever you do, somebody eventually will break it. So then the question is, when do you actually stop doing things, or what do you do to actually solve it? So we're going to talk about a bit later. So you get a bigger door, which is great. It's amazing. But you still see the problem is there. So you move on and you get this encrypted binary protocol that all your APIs are super secured and encrypted, and you have this private keys and public keys system, which is great, and it kind of fends off the attackers or anybody who's trying to steal your cakes for a little while, but then they come back. So then you think about, okay, looked at Google, they do two-factor authentication. This is becoming very popular nowadays. Your banking apps, your access to mobile apps, for companion apps, for pretty much all the popular software products at some point have or will introduce two-factor authentication. Now what this does, like for Devon, the cookie maker, is basically asking her mom to come answer the door, and every time she needs to give out a, semi-prime number for whoever's knocking on the door to factorize it, which is easy. There's a problem. Everybody knows that you can't unfactorize, or you can't factorize semi-prime numbers which are large unless you're, extremely smart. Nobody's done it so far, so everybody thinks, phew, I got two-factor, nobody's going to be able to hurt me, which is correct to some point. And as you're walking through all of this, you're going to see that the level of, say, intelligence of attackers and of people trying to exploit your system is getting smarter. So everything you throw at them, it just makes them either learn something new or peel off and make room for somebody who's a bit more advanced. So you have two-factor, but then somebody's, hacker Mike, for example, is able to just read out somehow through a mind-reading device the contents of your mother's brain, and he sees patterns and he sees what's going on in her brain, so he's able to actually come up with the answer. So he's able to break, in some way, your two-factor authentication. PI doesn't stand for actual PI. It's called position-independent executable, which what it does is whenever you run software, so that somebody can't actually read into your memory blocks and look at what is changing execution after execution, it just put it in random order. So just, there's ways you can do it. So this sort of concludes the tech summary, which is the most boring one, and it's the one that everybody resorts to. Like everybody, I want to secure my app, sure, I'll just Google this techie stuff about encrypting and blocking access and using advanced protocols, and this is great. But you notice that every measure, lowers your exposure for a while, but then whoever is doing something to you is coming back. You don't know if it's the same person, or if it's a smarter person, or it's the same person that got smart, but it is coming back. So eventually, anything you throw against it is going to prove that it's being broken ultimately. So what do? You don't get discouraged. You don't say, I'm done. This is as much as I'm going to do. You just got to keep investing in it. On the bad side, if it wasn't bad already, your customers are getting annoyed. They have to enter two-factor things. They have to memorize numbers. They got to, just for a cookie, which doesn't make sense anymore. So you got to look at it from a just different angle from now on. So you start hiring people. You hire server engineers, and you hire business analysts and data analysts and security experts and marketing guys to reacquire your users that have just left because your cookies are too hard to buy. And you build this team, and what this team does ultimately is just produce this, which is data, basically. And it's super important to security to just know what your data is about and what it does and what it looks like, so you can actually draw smart conclusions from it. So once you know how many people are coming through your front door, how many people are coming to the back door, if the number of people coming in is the same as the number of people going out, if the people using your product are doing what they're supposed to do or not, how much money you're spending on building cookies or games, and how much money you're losing based of you don't know what, but at least you have the numbers. So that's great. Having numbers is always a super valuable thing. So this is a more sort of niche thing. What happens at some point you notice that hacker Mike is not alone. He has like a bunch of other people working with him. And you don't know if they're family or they're friends or some guys brought over from another country, but they're just working there and they're all swarming your store doing stuff. So rate limits, what that is basically trying to put a stop or prevent anybody's abnormal activity, something that the normal user wouldn't do. So your first type of rate limit, say you don't want to sell more than 5 cookies to a single person a day, which is great, because hacker Mike can come in, you'd look at, I've sold a maximum of 4 cookies for 1 person a day, so my limit is going to be 5. No more than 5. So that's great. But then, like I said, Mike brings on his friend. So you realize that's not really effective anymore. So you start going sort of wide. That means that you got to control the number of times you say, I don't know, open your refrigerator door. That means you're taking a cake out of the refrigerator, but it also means that you can't do it more than, say, I don't know, 200 times a day. Because if you set just this limit, you're going to see 100 of friends coming and buying 4 cookies, staying under the radar, exploiting your cookies in some way, and still, you don't pick them up. If you do this, you get a bit far ahead. And again, this is all fantastic. But what if, hacker Mike, somebody somehow manages to get more people that they all stay under the radar, and they just operate in some, specific time intervals or moments when you're not watching, and it somehow doesn't apply to all your limits. So you get sort of vertical and slide, and you protect yourself against burst. So you know that one customer cannot buy more cookies than, 100. You're looking at refrigerator door open events, and there's 100 per day. But that's great. What if somebody does, 99 in the first minute, and they just go away, and then somebody else comes and does 99 purchases, and it goes away, and so on. So you go vertical, and you prevent burst. You say you can do that, but no more than 2 per minute or 2 per hour. That's another way of just somewhat bulletproofing your system to how it is being accessed. It basically comes down to how you want users to just interface with it, good enough that normal people don't get affected, and good enough or bad enough that people who do want to hurt can't do that easily. So then, after you have all that in place, you can look at who broke those limits. Whoever comes in and try to, upset your standards, you can identify him. You can kick him. You can ban him forever. You can, be more subtle and just watch his behavior and set a specific, score to him. Say every time you break a limit, your score goes up by 100. Once you hit 1,000, maybe it was an accident the first time. Once you hit 1,000, you're out. You get banned. So that's, one way of dealing with it. So up to now, you realize basically that everything you've done has been either outsmarted or outnumbered. That's a very important thing of how people actually do break your apps. They don't have to be super smart, but if they can go wide and if they can emulate like behavior in a huge numbers, then you got a problem. The 2080 of security doesn't really exist. It just sounds nice because it's not 2080. What the point is there is that you got to focus on people who are too dumb to qualify to break your system. Like you have, I don't know, Bob living with his parents in Utah in the basement who's able to crack into your system. You got to fix that problem, obviously. And then you have super advanced, corporations or groups of hackers that have money and funding and systems and means to actually break it. And you got at least got to do what you can to pick the low-hanging fruit, which is the people, the easy fixes, the obvious exploits, which are, easier to just plug holes, versus, the expert, which at best you can monitor and you can sort of guide his way through your game. It's pretty much a psychological game to some point. You know what he can do. You know that he can take you out, for example, at some point. You got to make it really difficult for that to happen, and just clear your path of anybody who's brain dead but still can get into your app because you forgot this text file that says your max HP points somewhere, and it just edits that and it works. So, but the good thing, you know what's happening. So data is like crucial to security. Knowing what's happening in your system, how people are actually exploiting your game, is super important. And the last, I think, chapter of this is when you realize that there's a bigger world than just Hack or Mike trying to exploit your cookies, or just your random guy trying to break your product. And it's a wider game than that. So what you do, the first thing you do is just get the problem out of your house and move your refrigerator to cloud refrigerating systems, which have a lot of advantages. The problem is not in your house. Whoever is in your house can actually, there's no point in them getting into your house and steal other things. They just got to attack somebody else. Now, assumingly, a cloud service has seen this kind of problems before and does provide you with like a framework of how you can limit access, how you can do software deploys, or block IPs, do a whole bunch of things to your game or to your product that internally it's really hard to do. They have burst limit, they have DDoS prevention to some point, but they cost money. That's the bad part. So now that you have all that, again, the next level in data is just solutions that you can't afford to actually build yourself anymore because it's just too complicated. If your cookie business has gone so big that it spans across continents and you have millions and millions of users buying cookies every day, your accountant or whatever your Excel file who accounts for cookies you've sold and customers you've served doesn't work anymore. So you go for something like big. This is, I don't know what this is, but Splunk, for example, is a super powerful tool of real-time data ingestion where you can pay, obviously, to use, and you can look at a whole bunch of patterns and information around where your customers are coming from, the frequency of that, is there any connection between them, is there any pattern you can pick up based on how they interact with your system. So again, this is sort of as big as we currently know it can get, which is worldwide. You got to have community management. That's super important. Like everybody, or most of the people who actually are able to break a game, want to brag about it. And they're going to brag about it on Reddit or YouTube, and they're going to sell stuff on eBay, and they're just going to have a dodgy account number and the Skype address, and you talk to them, and you pay them something, and they give you something back, and they sort of loophole your economy. So community management, like, super important. You got to look at, and you can't do it yourself. You got to have somebody doing that. You got to look at YouTube videos, Reddit posts, eBay items that are being sold, and you got to pick those things up and just work back from those to who you actually need to worry about. Server authoritative. This is a no-brainer, and everybody wants to do it, but just not everybody does it, simply because they think, nobody's going to do that to my game anyway. It's fine if they just, roll back the hour on their phone or set something different on a PC. Yeah, they get 5 extra lives, so who cares? Well, somebody will, and if there's a loophole somewhere, somebody's going to exploit it. You can be sure of that. So what server authoritative means is that basically everything that the client can do is then automatically verified or, enforced on the server. Every logic that's happening in your game should be just coming from actions that are just your client spawns, and then your server dictates if it's good or bad. So great success. Hacky Mike is gone, and you finally managed to just get him out of the system. You think you're doing good. Your numbers are looking a bit better. It seems that you finally managed to plug all the holes. And this is one mistake that everybody does. They just go at some point and say, phew, I did it, that's it. No need to worry anymore, my app is super secure. So until one day, when say, I don't know, your server admin comes to you and tells you half your inbound connections are coming from China. And you think, wow, that's fantastic. I've made super popular cookies in China, which is good, but if you look at like the top of internet traffic attacks, half of them, I think, almost half, are coming from China. So you reconsider that point of making super popular Chinese cookies. And like, oh my God, somebody's coming, somebody's doing this on a mass level from a specific country. So what can you do about that? Well, not too much other than just going back to the drawing board and picking up patterns, looking at IP ranges, looking at geographical locations, eventually banning some territories that you see are like 99% fraudulent and 1% legit. You gotta take that hit. It's always a balancing game. So that being said, you realize at some point that you can't withhold the traffic anymore because there's just too many people. Some of them are legit customers, some of them are just attackers. They all take up your bandwidth at some point, or just all take up your the amount of concurrent sessions you can withhold on your machine. So at some point, you got to stop throttling users. What this means is that you allow no more than, say, 5 million, 3 billion concurrent users at a time, which is great, but you can't actually tell the system who it should keep out and who it shouldn't. Once the limit is reached, it just automatically kicks out everybody else who's trying to connect, which is not super user-friendly, but it's your last resort, and you're kind of feeling kind of shitty about it. Another way of doing it is sort of like a bit more advanced and sort of tying a connection to your user. You're actually verifying their ID in some form, whether you're verifying their device ID, their personal user ID. A lot of sites just at some point ask you for a valid email and all that. Not saying it can't be broken. Most of them are, but at least you get some form of confidence that whoever is accessing your service is a legit person or has gone to the length of actually fabricating a valid ID verification. Next level to this is having some form of access to verify that identity with the issuing authority, which is really painful. So you got to have some sort of service where you can ask a first party of some sort or a group, a central group, whether this ID, hey, this guy just came into my store, this is his ID or claimed ID, is this legit? And they tell you back, yeah, that's legit, let him in, great. If not, kick him out. So there's ways you can do that in games. There's stuff like Game Center and there's stuff like Google Plus, and there's consoles offer some form of ID verification. And what it does is forces presumed attackers to actually buy hardware or figure out a way around that. Which it becomes more expensive. So it doesn't actually plug the holes, it just makes it harder for people doing bad stuff to your game. So actually, eventually, everything's done and you're fine and everything worked and you can go to sleep. But for now, because what the next level of, once you upset somebody, once you kick them out completely and they can't make it actually any more profit off of you, because that's their ultimate point. They do stuff to your game, they can acquire some form of currency, or they can do something that they either sell to somebody else or use for themselves to just make money, ultimately. So the next level is denial of service. And this one's pretty shitty because it's not really easy to control. The only problem here is that it costs money, and it's a bandwidth, basically, bid war. If whoever's trying to take you down has enough finance and enough capital and resources and interest in taking you down, they can do it. Like, you see reports going out, once a year. NSA system went down, NASA system went down, Pentagon system went down. It can be done. It's just really expensive and really tricky depending on who you're targeting. Yeah. So there's no obvious prevention to this. You just gotta, and this sort of to the psychological aspect of things. You just don't want to upset everybody who's cheating in your game. You just want to pick the ones who can't fight back. That's somewhat like a smart approach rather than trying to kick everybody out and bulletproofing your game completely, because at some point you're gonna have any line of defense against this kind of things. So you'd rather have 5% cheating in 5 million that you just assume the loss and you just give them out some money and they're happy, and you don't shut them down, because if you do, they're from China and can spawn your server with 100 billion connections and you lose service for like 5 hours, which equals to more money lost, and you actually take the hit and let them do whatever they want to do in your game. And of course, the last point to this is the human factor. Like, nothing can, as long as we're dealing with humans and there's human bodies in our building, in our services, in our companies, in our whatever products, humans are the most unsecure, form of technology available. So one way to tackle it is, hire them. You know somebody who's hacked your game. You somehow tracked him down. You know that he's, posting on Reddit about every exploit he finds. You try to do something about it. You can't do anything about it. So you end up, offering a whole lot of money and come work for us, so that you know what's happening. One, you're out of the market because now you work for us. You make enough money to just, stop doing that and stop making all our, exploits popular. So, it's one option. So you do hire Hacker Mike, and if you're interested in this kind of topics, you can subscribe to this guy's newsletter, which is just scary. Like, I get it, I think, once a month or once every 2 weeks, I don't know exactly. Just reading to it is just really, really scary. The level of exposure that super high-end government agencies have against various types of attacks is just, super, super scary. So the question is, and I've always asked myself, so why don't attackers just do that every day? Why don't they just take down everything for good? And I'm just speculating right now. One potential answer would be that they don't want to do it because it's just doing fine, doing it every once in a while. Another speculation that this guy entertains, at least, is that all the commercial software products and banks, games, just general products are just a piggy bag, or well, not piggy bag, like a guinea pig for other types of initiatives. So they know it's a race against who is able to secure their systems and who's able to break it. And once they've topped out and they've managed to take down, I don't know, Microsoft's account system or iCloud's photo library, and they leak Paris Hilton's photos, or they break Hillary Clinton's email databases, they know they can go one step further, and this doesn't tie into games anymore or just applications. They can go after what they actually want, which is, I don't know, secure private information, military secrets, and all that. So that, again, that's one way to think about it. And it's, again, reading this guy's thing for 2 years, whole lot of information is public, it's just very, very quiet. There's, you would think your banking app is safe, and this is sort of a funny example, which I tried with my banking app. I'm not gonna say the bank, it just starts with an R. They have a mobile app that if you can do payments, you can send stuff to friends, but if you put a proxy in the middle between your phone and whatever outgoing connection you have, that level of security is just mind-boggling. Everything is in just clear text. Your user, your password, your credentials, everything, any transaction you want to do is perfectly visible to anybody. The good news is, and actually, they've actually been smart about it, or lucky, is that you can't do too many things within the mobile app versus what you can in the desktop app. Desktop app has the two-factor thing, which is great, can't be cracked for now. But the mobile app is just, hilarious. This is how much people actually think that they need to worry about security. So yeah, that was basically what this was all about, just trying to get everybody's attention or awareness around why securing stuff, software in general, is super important if you want to be successful. So yeah, what we've learned, it's obviously costly. So the more you put effort into it and the more you want to secure stuff against higher end attackers, the more expensive it's going to get. It's never done, and that's something I try to tell everybody. You're never done. You're never completely protected unless you shut down your game and you shut down your software and you just don't sell it anymore. That's when you're protected. Other than that, it's an ongoing effort and just takes days and weeks and months and years to actually do it. Nothing is secure, which is obviously. There's layers to it, and it's the onion example. So there's like we talked about, there's a super basic get a door in your house, use an encrypted protocol kind of layer, and there's at the other end of the spectrum, the middle dense core of the whole problem, which is community management and looking at what you can tolerate between attackers and which attackers you can't. How do you balance like your revenue versus your exposure? So yeah, the balance is, I guess, key. And I cannot stress out the value of just having data on your system. If you don't have data, you might be as well exploited or broken without actually knowing it. And I think we're done. I was hoping for many questions. No questions. Awesome.